The Panama Canal is like a cheat code for global trade. Instead of ships taking the long, dangerous trip around the southern tip of South America, where storms and rough waters have doomed countless vessels, they can cut right through Panama, saving time, fuel, and a whole lot of hassle. This isn't just a small convenience, it's a total game changer that reshapes global shipping routes and impacts economies worldwide. This shortcut has been vital for over a century, especially for countries like the US. But here's the thing, the canal isn't just a straightforward waterway, it's an engineering marvel, a system of lakes and locks that lifts and lowers massive ships between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. It's like an aquatic elevator for cargo giants. The idea for this passage goes way back to 1513 when Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa first crossed the Isthmus of Panama and realized just how much time and effort could be saved if a canal existed. Of course, actually building it took centuries, and the final result wasn't completed until 1914. Today, it handles about 14,000 ships a year, moving around 5% of the world's total trade. That might not sound like much, but when you consider the billions of dollars worth of goods being transported daily, it's clear that this canal is one of the most critical waterways on the planet. The canal's design dictates the size of many ships. For years, vessels were built specifically to fit within the original locks. This size was known as Panamax. But as trade demands grew, so did ships, leading to a massive canal expansion in 2016 that allowed even larger Neo-Panamax vessels to pass through. This was a huge deal because it meant ships could carry far more cargo, making global shipping even more efficient. However, even with these upgrades, some ships are still too big for the canal, most notably, U.S. aircraft carriers. These floating fortresses have no choice but to take the long way around, which isn't just inconvenient, it's a strategic disadvantage. If the US needed to quickly move an aircraft carrier from the Atlantic to the Pacific, it would have to go all the way around South America or take a riskier route through the Suez Canal, where potential threats lurk. During World War II, the Panama Canal was absolutely crucial. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. needed to quickly move naval forces to the Pacific, and the canal made that possible. It remains just as important today, particularly for submarines. While some high-tech submarines can slip under Arctic ice caps to move between oceans, many still rely on the canal, and their transits are shrouded in secrecy. Despite its importance to U.S. strategy, American warships don't get a free pass through the canal. They have to pay hefty fees just like everyone else. The average cost per ship? Around $700,000, but it can easily go over $1 million, especially during peak times when demand is high. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Panama capitalized on this by charging priority fees for ships that didn't want to wait in long lines. While this might sound frustrating, it makes sense. Panama relies on canal revenue to fund its infrastructure, education, and economy. It brings in around $4 to $5 billion a year, making it the country's most valuable asset. But the canal isn't just a financial asset, it's also a geopolitical flashpoint. Throughout history, it's been a target. During World War II, Japan considered attacking it to disrupt U.S. military logistics, though they ultimately abandoned the plan. Today, concerns have shifted toward China. Some U.S. officials worry that in a conflict, a Chinese submarine could launch missiles at the canal's lock system, crippling global trade and hampering America's ability to respond to a crisis in the Pacific. However, China may not even need military force to exert influence over the canal. Over the past few decades, Chinese companies have secured control of major ports on both ends of the canal. Officially, these ports are for commercial use, but history has shown that economic footholds can easily turn into strategic assets. Before 1977, the U.S. actually owned and operated the canal, maintaining a military presence to protect it. But after turning it over to Panama, the country became fully responsible for its operations and security. Some U.S. policymakers have debated whether it would be worth trying to reacquire the canal, not through military means, but through financial deals. If the Panama Canal were ever up for sale, experts estimate its strategic value would push its price tag into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Buying it outright would likely be impossible, but negotiating a long-term lease could be a more realistic option. The problem? Panama has zero interest in selling. The canal isn't just an economic engine, it's a symbol of national pride and sovereignty. Plus, having the world depend on this tiny stretch of water ensures that Panama remains geopolitically relevant. As long as the canal is operational, major powers like the US and China have a vested interest in Panama's stability. But what if the US decided to take the canal by force? That would be a disaster. Not only would it completely destroy America's global reputation, but it would also lead to massive economic and diplomatic fallout. Countries around the world would impose sanctions, similar to what happened to Russia after its invasion of Ukraine. Worse, US military alliances could crumble. Right now, America relies on friendly nations to host military bases worldwide, allowing it to project power across the globe. If the US suddenly decided to strong-arm Panama, it could send a chilling message to allies, making them question whether hosting US forces is really in their best interest. And Panama wouldn't be powerless in this scenario either. If the US tried to seize the canal, Panama could sabotage its own lock system, rendering the canal useless for years. It could also cut off cooperation on regional issues like migration, which would only worsen border challenges for the US. At the end of the day, the Panama Canal isn't just a shortcut for ships, it's a lifeline for global trade and a crucial element of US strategy. Maintaining control and access to the canal is undeniably important, but the best path forward isn't military action or political posturing. Instead, smart diplomacy, economic partnerships, and careful negotiations are the keys to ensuring that this vital waterway remains open and secure for years to come.